COVID-19 shook the world, crippling the economies of countries both big and small, developed and underdeveloped. Pacific small island developing states such as Fiji were among the hardest hit. These Pacific island countries already faced a unique set of vulnerabilities that hinder economic growth and development, including their small size, remoteness, limited resource base, and greater exposure to the risks of climate change and natural disasters. One such area that was still recovering from the effects of natural disasters and climate change when COVID-19 hit was the village of Tukuraki in the interior of Yakete in the province of Ba in Fiji.
It was just a heavy rain that landslide happened.
Tukuraki is one of the first highlands village in the world to be relocated after a tragic landslide in 2012 buried a large part of their village and tragically took the lives of a young family, including a toddler and a young baby. The village and the district dug deep to recover from the tragedy, and the devastating cyclones Winston in 2016 and Tropical Cyclone Yasa in 2020. Working from a converted sugar shack at Fiji's Sabeto Valley, Rise Beyond the Reef coordinated with remote highlands and island communities to harness the strengths of traditional structures and the power of women's farming and artisan work that has sustained Fiji's rural economy for hundreds of years.
So the work of Rise Beyond the Reef, we work on districts. For Rise Beyond the Reef, the model of our work is our entry point to a community is through women. And what we always say in Fiji, and they say, ni ratuko ko walatina ni vanua bulan abatua. And when women thrive in their community, their home community will thrive. So we set up our structure on the ground that is women-led. The supply chain of the handicraft, it's all women-led. And that existing structure is already there, that leadership. And that came really handy during COVID. Here, our office in Sabeto, the border was in Lomolomo. We could not get to Lotoka. And there was another border between Lotoka and Ba.
As COVID-19 hit and thousands lost their jobs, and many of the communities they worked with were locked out of their markets and source of income, Rise Beyond the Reef worked to reignite ingrained cultural and social strengths to effectively respond to the food supply challenges caused by the pandemic. Two key cultural and traditional models of responding to crisis and meeting set targets were activated: the Basa Exchange and the Sole Solevaki. These two models sourced the power of rural highlands and outer island communities to supply food to families who were under lockdown in urban centers.
During those lockdown times, people in the community, whether what they planted or whatever was in season, it was in abundance. There were the locked-in communities, those that were in that have COVID case and inside the lockdown areas, and they were the rural and remote communities were the locked out. Locked out in the sense of they are locked out of their market. Their livelihood, it's every Friday, Saturday they come and sell in the market. But during COVID times, the market got closed down. So there were things that they had that they can share. We fed Loloma home, we fed old people's home, we fed people in Ba, people were quarantined in Ba, we fed the Lotoka hospital when it got locked down, all of the stuff. These villages in here, like these people who are living in caves, they brought whatever they can bring on the roadside when we came and picked up the Basa Exchange. And we told them $75. Just go and gather whatever worth $75. Just make sure that it has meals, that something they can eat, crops and vegetable fruits. Yeah, a lot of what they take to the markets are bananas, chilies, the lambe that they grow on along the creek. But most of it too is whatever the fruits that are in season, or yams that are in season, and these are wild harvest crops. And if it's mango season, you'll see them selling mangoes in the market. If it's guava season, you'll see them selling guava. When it's time to harvest turmeric, you'll see turmeric and laya. That what makes it into the... But bananas is something they can sell all year round.
As the economic and social impacts of COVID-19 hit hard, the Basa Exchange helped remote communities who lost market opportunities to continue to earn an income by selling their produce to feed families affected by the lockdown.
Every week they go down to sell in the market, but they cannot take it down to the market because nobody, it's locked in there. Nobody is selling in the market. But that was their livelihood. Then that's where we start to, the idea of Basa Exchange come up. There were a lot of donors during the COVID times that are willing to support how we respond to COVID. And through Rise Beyond the Reef, its position as a non-profit organization reached out and got access to those funding. And that's where the idea of the Basa Exchange came about.
The Basa Exchange reignited an ancient exchange and revived traditional practices, skills, and methods of surviving and responding to crisis. As COVID-19 forced people to lose their jobs or work on reduced hours, thousands of families had to find alternatives. Many people rediscovered that while Pacific islands like Fiji had economic weaknesses and vulnerabilities, it also had communal customs that could sustain its people when the international economic system broke down. It cultivated livelihood and communal resilience in the middle of a pandemic, brought back practices that were healthier and sustainable, and created a greater sense of awareness of how to plan and prepare for crisis.
Andina ni may tao na bila ka kinabuni matitakali kwa may tao songo. Ya biya we na loma ni kwa nongo anda may tukina. Au bina kaninda kanya saranga nakakana ngai tuinda te ai. Bakali bakai liwe lebu nontanda ula ko na tao ninda kanya nakakana boli. Dono buli lebu saranga biki mam. Saba nga saranga nakakana inda te ai nakakana dinan ranikau. Klani ba bure mbula talanga weekend. Sandu ya lito niken sandu pinakatanga na kana babalang ipata kiba kimi na tumina taon. Ando na kauri na kina ni binaka na melta ko sana. Nakanda wakana binanga ando nga na iba kasala libu ka kanibuli talenga biyaw na nongray da mendandao tuwa rawa libu. Nda buli da ninda sotaba nanga na nindre. Ni mekanibuli bekenda. Ni libu na ngauna enda mbula tunga baka wile enda sinda ukawai takatuna nonda mbula nenda ngarauna tuninda uyado enda nakaembasi kagina nonda mbula da baka binabina kani ndo na buli libu kimami buli saratalenga na bekaya ditigo bikimami baka binabina kani buli kimami ni ndo na mbula bo ndo na raibo ndo na baka nananu bo na kena taki me kimami mbula na mbula ni sole baki.
Practices such as Solevaki, which has been discarded as an ancient and outdated method that had no relevance in the now modern economic system, were brought back to life as they proved their timeless quality and how Fijians have turned to them for centuries.
We've always defined Solevaki as coming together for a greater good beyond just oneself. So whatever we do, it's for a greater good. And you see this a lot in traditional community, especially for those rural and remote communities. That's how they farm their land. That's how they build their house. That's how they do wedding, or even in funeral. They all come together to pitch in whatever they have to be able to share the obligation of that event, whether it be a wedding, or whether it be a funeral, or whether it be building of a house, or even Solevaki for students, promising students from communities that are slowly making their way out of high school and university. They do the Solevaki concept. So coming together for a greater good.
As authorities and agencies around the world scrambled to find an adequate response to a pandemic no one had ever experienced, the Basa Exchange and Solevaki showed how resilient traditional practices can be absorbed into modern emergency response to crisis.
We are all familiar here in Fiji, 8 sector, even the community, they already have their natural disaster preparedness plan. Here in the month of November, this is the natural. We all know how to prepare to respond to disaster. When pandemic came, nobody knew how. How do we respond? How do we move forward from this? So we had to be creative, and we could not look anywhere else because everybody was suffering. We had to look at it with what we have, and that is the community, the strength of our community, our interconnectedness, the richness of our of where we've been placed. Be you are from the mountain, whatever you have from the mountain, in the coastline, whatever you have in the coastline, and we use we use our traditional tie. Rise Beyond the Reef has we don't have partner communities in Naitasiri, but I have family ties in Naitasiri, and that's who I use to call and say, can you organize your village? Can you go to Nasiru? It was locked down. We are here in Sabeto and they are in Naitasiri. Can you go to the next village in Nasiru too? Are they willing to provide food to feed the Waila house? And using that network that is off the grid, that's what enabled us to be able to move through and respond the way we did during this pandemic. That is the original Tukuraki village. I'm from this Tikina. These are my families, and growing up, I've never seen us to be like that, to live in a makeshift shelter. I've seen it in the village. This is where their forefathers, and they lived in makeshift shelter along this road, and kind of like. I present this in our Bosevano because I am the chairman of the development committee of this Tikina. And one of the things that I highlighted that we are refugee. Some members of our communities are refugees. They live along makeshift shelter along the side, and the Vanua needs to step up to help their relocation.
Andi Litia was a district coordinator for the Basa Exchange program in the district of Yakete, where the devastating second wave of COVID-19 hit. She helped in coordinating the arts and craft economic development aspect of the program, operating from the interior village of Tukuraki that had been relocated due to the impacts of climate change. Before COVID-19 hit, Andi Litia and the women of Tukuraki and surrounding villages earned a good income, working with Rise Beyond the Reef to provide an array of artifacts for Fiji's hotel and tourism industry.
Eu district coordinator, tinikangga tikonongo village coordinator. We are 140 plus na nongo member. Ora sada kada sora tosomai, sora sukalesu, sora sa tosomai go ina lomangan ni vida na bulang go ni oti na covid go au si kobarau ni tigo na vi korna loman rona madango irna ngoni bulir sini mai bulitungo ora satu so sarti ngamai. So tabi sarti go non rambula rabuke o samaru takati go non ralebibu kana daga ni linga. Ay nabi koro tersara wa ilabo sara sara dan resala ko na tawon ni salibul ya na karangan reba na bukunya da tuokina na COVID-19.
After seeing the challenges faced by the rural women at Yakete to sell their produce at markets that was difficult to reach and where they had to struggle in the sun and rain for days to earn something for their families, Rise Beyond the Reef looked to initiate an innovative and sustainable business project, playing to the women's strengths and skills. The basic concept was, if women developed and thrived, the family and the community developed and thrived.
Eu mandanga ni tulo mani bubale. Betul pa antoni kem dona wiring ni neto kambaletan lele eu nakata usoma. Ni tu turang sa ritu ngai sa nunggu tabi ngorem beta usa turang na ilabongo. Sa anda pa bibina kena ya bibukile na isong-songo. Ya nga sarang apa kali bikim. Nda pa bibina kin tatu bango lo mesini isong-songo ro bukikian. Na kena ngoni sala menda bukikin na tu mai bango lo mani bekau.
we really had our family time together. And then of course we go to the farm, we plant more than we have been planting before. We've planted more crops and vegetables. And from there till now, as the thing has been normalized, so what we did, we are now taking that produce again to the market. The men came to a stage where they came to realize that the thing that we've been doing, it really supports the family. We've been doing all the work and then we're earning a lot of money to support the family.
As COVID-19 forced physical lockdowns and shut them down from their traditional markets, Rise Beyond the Reef turned to online sales and e-commerce to stay alive and resilient.
We were about 95% wholesale based with our market in Fiji pre-COVID. We were selling, and growing really rapidly. So, searching outside of Fiji wasn't something we had invested a lot in. And obviously with the pandemic, our market sort of just disappeared within about 2 weeks. And so we had to figure out, what other types of products could we make for sort of the aid sector market. So we switched quickly into doing things like masks. We transitioned into making sort of natural-based products like coconut soap with the women and things like that for hygiene kit distribution. But in addition to that, we were lucky enough to get support from sort of an e-commerce specialist who really advised us on what we needed to do to become more serious in that space. With e-commerce, you need to show everything that you're selling to the customer. And you need multiple marketing photos per product. So we didn't necessarily have all of that. So it's taken a bit to sort of reorient, how we document our products. And you also want to show sort of the person behind each product, the place it comes from, in addition to the product. So we've had to sort of overhaul our marketing strategy on that. If you're using social media as your primary place to sell a product, you have to have something new sort of every day. And so it's really been, ongoing work with him. So like Taibu, who you met yesterday and interviewed earlier, this is one of her traditional patterns. This is one of her pillows, right? And because we are a nonprofit and do the full, sort of A to Z in terms of, product, getting it from communities to market, we also do everything that happens in between. So like, for example, we ordered these pillows. You can tell this came in a different direction, right? So part of my discussion with Taibu and I saw in the community yesterday is like, okay, we need to make sure that, it's just as it's listed online. So again, working in the Pacific where there's not been a lot of sort of market access for e-commerce, it's working with artisans to understand like it has to look the same every time.
It was also important that people who bought the products are made aware of the stories behind what they were buying and the stories of the women who made the products.
Ang guna daw tugon ito na talano ateg, talano ateg. So ang guna na teg ko merambiu ke na bi product yan dudua. Ni sada kan do na product finishing ba binaka. Redo ni sa nito ba binaka ke mamsanga ililingan go na teg.
So all of our products have a talanoa tag, and it's really a way for people to understand what is the difference with community made, that this was made by somebody in their community. And our tags list both the name of the artisan and the community that they come from. Because we really want people to connect to the person and place and to build an understanding through that connection, through our products.
The devastating economic and social impacts of COVID-19 have highlighted the importance of nurturing the strengths of our traditional cultures and structures that have sustained Pacific peoples for centuries. It has shown that resilience in the Pacific has long been built on existing structures and systems, an economy of solidarity.
Doon na bunaw libta lang ay sula may COVID-19. May ndaray valis talikin non dali so nakatakan sulsulwa. Di na may yado so nakabaya. Indo no mendaray da nakatakan sulsulwa. Bata na bulan ningon ni ko sindra menda law ko ba tagikin da menda ka bindo naka. Meron todo kinanon da bibu ke bira na tani. Kinanon da bakanya na koro. Kena bika me da Lotawa na buni bika laba gina korandel do na ulutang alibungan do no menda tauribaka menda takata na do sulsulwa ramara una marama ni do na ure ni kau telengan non rambulan bingar binon rabu bale na takata ni linga kina Basa sama ya do tu na buni song ni Rise Beyond the Reef ramara wi do telengan rayo raidira kina Nanon rabi toko na turanga. Nirsa rawi labo na marama. Arsa wasiabata rabi tanwataka. Asa aso tabi sarangaki na nandende nimbula. Nibika embasi katigo na kanani.
They also highlight the importance of resetting our economies to be more creative and resilient. And in doing so, there must be greater recognition of the important role women play on the front lines of community development. The Basa Exchange further highlights how greater value must be placed in developing and investing in leaders within rural and remote communities.